He's excited.
Sure, excited. Okay, good evening. My name is Phillip, and today college admission tests are considered when granting students admission to a university. Specifically, many colleges require that students report their scholastic aptitude test scores, or SATs, during the application process. In fact, I'm sure many of you had to put down your SAT scores when you applied to Cal Poly Pomona. Well, in many cases, SATs are used to help gauge a student's academic potential in college. According to the College Board, the SAT and SAT subject tests are designed to assess your academic readiness for college. However, I'm here today to present the argument that the SAT fails to assess academic readiness for college, and the three main reasons for my argument are that: one, the format of the SAT does not reflect student knowledge or understanding of the material presented on the exam. Two, the SAT scores tend to correlate with higher socioeconomic class, which puts minorities at a disadvantage. And three, some colleges have already eliminated the mandatory reporting of SAT scores because they have found that student transcripts are a far better representation of students' academic potential in college. So first, I want to examine the structure of the SAT test. I'm sure most of you are familiar with the format test because you had to take it probably. But just in case, the SAT consists of three main categories: math, critical reading, and writing. The majority of the test is multiple choice, with the exception of the essay and the grid and free response section of the math portion. And the test is broken down into 10 sections total, each ranging from 10 to 25 minutes. The main issue people have concerning the SAT format is that the time constraints, along with the constant switching between subjects, emphasizes speed and stamina over critical thinking and understanding of the material. In an article appearing in the Chronicle of Higher Education Journal, two professors retook the SAT in an attempt to answer the central question: is the SAT a good test? According to the first author, Professor Harper of Temple University, the SAT fails to provide an adequate measure of what the student might actually know. He agreed that the test emphasized speed and stamina over knowledge of the material presented on the exam. He reported, "I had about 1 minute to answer each question, almost no time for any critical analysis or contemplation. Speed was more important than analysis." As you can see, the time constraints of the exam discourage critical thinking, which is actually a major attribute most colleges prefer that their students possess. In fact, my professors always encourage me to take the time to carefully read and analyze each problem or the given test for the purpose of understanding the material. They frown upon the method of speed reading for the purpose of just finding the answer, which is exactly what the SAT promotes. Second reason why the SAT fails to measure students' college preparedness is that studies have found that higher SAT scores correlate with higher socioeconomic status, therefore putting minority students at a disadvantage. For example, a study published in the American Educational History Journal found that white applicants score higher than average on all three composite tests, and as a result tend to score the highest on the SAT as a whole. On the other hand, African Americans on average consistently scored the lowest, while Chicano Latino students scored below average and Asians scored just above average on all three composite scores of the SATs. The most reasonable explanation for this trend was effectively described by Anthony Carneval, research director of Georgetown University. He asserts that higher education doesn't make a profit, so the way it compensates is on the basis of prestige. In other words, when a school can advertise that its students have a higher average SAT score, it gives the institute a more selective reputation, which as a result attracts more affluent students. The well-to-do students tend to have the money to afford the SAT prep and private tutoring that achieving the high scores on the SAT requires. On the contrary, minority students tend to lack the ability to afford to participate in SAT programs and usually go to schools where SAT prep courses are unavailable. Furthermore, minority students are more likely to have tighter schedules, making it difficult for them to work in studying for the SAT along with their school, work, and family responsibilities. Clearly, the SAT puts minority students at a disadvantage when it comes to preparing for the exam. Because the SAT does not make the test preparation programs more accessible to the students who can afford them, the more affluent students who can actually afford the professional tutoring and SAT prep courses are more likely to yield better results. The last reason that demonstrates the SAT does not adequately assess students' academic readiness for college is that some universities have already eliminated the mandatory reporting of SAT scores in their application process. This is because colleges are finding that students' transcripts are far better representations of students' academic potential in college. In fact, Bowdoin College has made the submission of SAT scores optional for the purpose of admission since 1969. According to the university's website, Bowdoin College adopted the policy so that students have the freedom to decide whether or not their test scores accurately reflect their academic potential. Furthermore, Bates College, which is another university that doesn't require the reporting of SAT scores on the application, has made reliable college potential assessments about the students they admit without the help of any SAT scores. According to the book Standardized Minds by Peter Sachs, Bates college admissions committees over the years have been right most of the time about the young people they decide to admit, even without the standardized test scores that the Education Testing Service and College Board suggests colleges simply cannot live without. Additionally, a commission created by the National Association for College Admission Counseling recently advised that colleges and universities move away from reliance on the college admission test scores during their application process. So all these examples illustrate the declining significance of SAT scores in assessing students' academic readiness for college. Simply put, colleges are beginning to lose faith in the SAT's ability to assess college preparedness. Rather, the merit that matters in gauging students' college potential is based on his or her transcript. So I hope I have convinced you to consider my argument. In the end, intelligence is not something that can be quantified. For all the students out there who weren't so happy with their SAT scores, I hope you realize that your SAT score was just a number. I suggest that you use your time in college to defy your SAT score by exceeding your predicted levels of academic potential. Thank you.
All right, Philip, the topic identification is clear, the proposition's good, there's an excellent layout of what the supporting structure is. There's a little bit of the controversy because you define from the College Board what the SAT is supposed to do. There's not much explanation about how important the SAT is to the decision-making process. For instance, is it the deciding element or is it one of many deciding elements? And I think your argument is predicated on the assumption that it is at least one of the most important, if not the most important, and I think you need to have a little bit of background information to demonstrate that. In the internal parts of the speech, everything's well organized and easy to follow. I do think that there are a couple of places where you are making inferences based on very limited data. For example, on that first point, the only evidence that you have are two professors who took the test, and one of them talked about his experience of taking the test, and then based on that, we're reaching the conclusion that this is really a time stamina kind of issue. And that seems to me to be a little underwhelming in terms of proof. You could probably use more data on that. The second point I thought was interesting, except it does seem to suggest that we're focusing on the outcome more than on the accomplishments. And if there's a problem with the way the accomplishments are being measured and the SAT doesn't measure those things, that should be your argument. This idea that you're on the brink of being a conspiracy guy when you're saying it's all the pardon the term, highfalutin colleges out there who are trying to create, stick their noses in the air as a way of doing this that is causing this particular problem. My guess is that there are lots of reasons that people in the categories that you're describing don't score well on the test, and it has nothing to do with what the colleges expect. It has to do with what the schools are being able to accomplish for them. And I think that that might matter, or maybe it doesn't matter. That's a different issue that would be argued. The one thing that I could definitely say about your argument, it is very nicely delivered. You talk to the audience very effectively, very smooth. Even though sometimes I did get the sense that you were reading, it didn't come across like you're reading. You sound like you're polished and you know what your argument is, and that you're only going to that canned language when you were making a particular point. So I thought that it worked very well. Thank you.
Thank you.